forward to doing everything I can to strengthen it. And being appointed by the governor to serve is part of our effort at the GBC to strengthen those relationships, but also contribute to the long-term vitality. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You're very welcome to be here. We're excited to continue working with you. And I think BMC will definitely benefit from your participation. And I just want to also thank, again, the staff and the team for putting together the BMC Chesapeake Connect trip. It was a fantastic, enlightening experience. It was so well organized, so well done. The team did a phenomenal job. I know many of us walked away with ideas of things that we could continue to do even better here, new ways of looking at things, and I'm very excited about what's in the future for the Baltimore region. Now, our first item of the morning is the approval of the July 21, 2022 meeting minutes. Those minutes were attached to your briefing packets, and I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? I'd like to now invite Toby Hollander from SB and Company to present the results of this year's single audit. Morning, Toby, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. I'll be presenting the results of the financial statement audit for fiscal year 2023. My name is Toby Hollander. I served as the engagement partner on the audit. I have Chris Lehman with me as well, who served as a client service partner. This year, the scope of services included the audit of the June 30, 2023 financial statements, as well as a single audit in accordance with uniform guidance. That's the federal grant compliance. We also performed the indirect cost report for fiscal year 2023. And for all three of those, we issued an unmodified or clean opinion. That's the best opinion that we can offer, which is great. We're also available for year-round consultation throughout the year. If management has questions, we're available to discuss with them. As I mentioned, we issued an unmodified, a clean opinion. We did not discover any instances of fraud, no material weaknesses in internal controls, and we also received full cooperation from management. On the bottom, you'll see the summary of results. So the change in net assets was an increase of 53,000 this year, which is compared to 128,000 this year. So continuing to grow in the net asset balance. There were no single audit findings, so there was nothing to report in the single audit report that you'll see in your packet. The rest of this slide, I'm not going to go through in detail, but it's in your financial statement, your report packet, so that you can review at a later time. But it goes through the summary of our controls, which we did not have any issues or recommendations to bring to your attention, as well as a 3-year comparison of the statements, and then also our required communications that we have with the board. So if anyone has any questions, I'll turn it over to you, but you can look through the packet in more detail.
Well, thank you so much, Toby. Any questions?
Move to adopt the audit. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And now I'd like to invite our Executive Director, Mike Kelly, to make the Executive Director's report to the board. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we're pulling up my presentation, there's 3 things I'm going to cover in this morning's report. First, I'm going to invite Matt Carpenter to come up and talk a little bit about the very impressive results of this year's energy purchasing program. I'll give a quick update on the formation of the Baltimore Regional Transportation Commission, and then a quick summary of last week's Chesapeake Connect trip. So Matt, if you could come up and join us, we can talk a little bit about this year's Energy Board findings. Matt chairs the board. Matt's a Baltimore County employee. He chairs the Energy Board for us. Baltimore County has chaired this board since its inception and has really taken on a great role for the region in doing that. And this year's results are going to speak for themselves, but we're very lucky to have Matt leading this.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to have the board take complete credit for the results. Obviously, what we're looking at was roughly a $73 million cost avoidance. However, within all things that we have to look at within energy, it's a matter of both strategy and situation that we find ourselves in. The strategy in which the board operates is pretty much locking up in hedge slots, energy before we even get there, the case was. We run a 3-year program going into the year so that we wind up locking up most of our energy, about 80% of it, before we even get to the year. We basically spread our risk out through multiple things and not one single point in time. Additionally, during the periods leading up to the winter time, we lock up our basis, the other port of power, which can definitely increase the price tremendously. Having that in place, we definitely benefited from previous years of much lower energy costs leading up in those hedges going to it, which then leads us to the situation. Within FY 23, there was a great deal of instability with the energy market, with the increased energy costs that we see going on. That instability is generally dictated mostly by the volatility of the world. Production voluntary cuts by the Saudis, the Russians, the invasion of Ukraine, all cause energy to go up. But there's other factors too which involve ourselves with this, particularly within 2022 to 23, the winter time. We had 2 instances in December and January, which you'll remember, of what we used to refer to affectionately back in 2014 is called polar vortexes. And within those things, what happens, there's a tremendous strain on the grid to basically produce enough power for the areas. If you all remember how cold it was during the Christmas time and Christmas Eve and so forth, that nature, people don't realize how close the BGE grid was to being strained to its max, what the case was. So if you're buying power at those particular times, just off the market like everyone else does under standard offer service or polar as they call it, you're paying between normally the time during that thing is about $30 an hour when we talk about it. It was over $100 an hour in prices at that point in time. And in December and January, you had similar situations throughout the markets. So if in the concept, if we've locked up power at 5 cents a kilowatt at that point, a kilowatt hour at that point in time, and people are paying tremendously more, obviously the savings speak for themselves on what we're talking here. That's sort of where you see the 73 million deriving. Many of the previous years, 20, 30, that kind of just out of dealing with the strategies in the market. I would say a predominant most of this was a lot dealing with the situations and us having the foresight to lock in both supply and basis before the winter hit. If you arrow, we have 2 more. Thank you. As we said, we look at this in the portfolio cost avoidance. When we talk about cost avoidance, we're referring to mainly what we've locked power and had bought power for versus the standard offer service rate or people just generally buying. And as you see, it's been a steady growth throughout the years of what we've seen wise as we're going along and trying to and cost avoidance in these situations. To the tune of somewhere in the neighborhood of since 2007, when the BRTB Energy Board started, had the entities been purchasing power, we've been purchasing somewhere in the neighborhood, we've been paying, if you paid at the standard offer service rate, about almost $300 million more across the portfolio if you've been buying straight from BG. The BRTB Energy Board functions almost as its own supplier. We have 24 different entities all co-opting together and buying power together directly from energy suppliers in our situations. So in that regard, it's when you have that kind of buying power, we are the single largest buyer of power within the grid. So we do have an excellent advantage in that. Questions?
Mr. Chair. Not a question, Mr. Carpenter, but just note of thanks, both for what you do for this group collectively, but we're also very proud of you in Baltimore County. So I want to just thank you for your leadership and your service.
Thank you. So to sum up the meeting so far, perfect audit and saved $74 million last year. If anyone notes, pretty good start. It's good for a Friday. Before I get into Chesapeake Connect, this month, the legislation that now Assistant Secretary Bridges, former delegate and BMC board member Bridges led last year to create the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission went into effect. We're in the process of finalizing the nominations. We have all of the names from the local governments participating, and I believe the governor's office is going through their nominations. Those meetings will start in January. The board will start getting updates on what that group is doing. Once the nominations are finalized, we're gonna spend the fall drafting the bylaws and getting the commissioners educated and up to speed on the system and what the purpose of the group is. We've been working very closely with Holly Arnold and her team to get this thing going, and we're excited to see it moving. So I just want to let the board know sort of where that was. And lastly, I just wanted to share a few of the photos from last week's trip to the Twin Cities. It was great to have full board participation. We're sending out a survey this week, and I'm looking forward to hearing what all the participants thought. And I'm looking forward to working with Vice Chair Commissioner Moran to start planning next year's. He's told me that he would like to be wearing shorts wherever it is. And after Detroit and Minnesota, I think we can do that. But just a few photos. This is one of our breakout groups. We had a group take a bike ride on the trip. It's always great to get out and actually see infrastructure projects. And County Executive Pittman's group got to see what I believe is the most used greenway in the country. And visit a public market there.
Electric bike, not just bike.
We weren't gonna make anyone work too hard, and I heard my staff was concerned at the speed that some of our senior members were riding, but it sounds like it was okay. We had a great opening session, just some of our team photos from the participants here. We had 2 chances to ride transit in the Twin Cities. This was the small group that I was a part of that went to downtown east, and then I believe I counted about 50 of the members rode transit to dinner one night, which was great to see. We had 2 buses drive over there, one of which was completely empty because everybody wanted to hop on the light rail, and it was a great experience to do that. We were lucky enough to see 2 mayors. I did not get a picture of both of them with their Orioles hats on. I got a ransom note out to St. Paul for the negatives on this one. But it was great to sort of open and close hearing from the leaders of those cities. And it really was a great group this year. And we're really looking forward to planning next year. You guys were all there, so I cannot imagine there's questions, but thank you again all for your participation. It was a wonderful trip, and it's a program that I'm glad has grown in popularity in the way that it has. If there's no more questions from the board, that'll complete my presentation in this portion of our meeting.
Thank you again, Mike, and I know I speak on behalf of the board of how appreciative we are and what a great experience we thought it was. Now looking to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. All any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. So now that the meeting is adjourned, I'm happy to turn the remainder of our time to Baltimore County Executive Johnny Olszewski, the chair of the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my friend and colleague, County Executive Dr. Ball. Welcome, everyone. Happy to call to order the 358th meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board. Today, we will be hearing from the Maryland Department of Transportation, Secretary Paul Wiedefeld and team to make a presentation on the fiscal year 24 draft consolidated transportation program. Following that presentation, we'll have an opportunity for some questions and then public participation. Mr. Todd Lang will manage that portion. Secretary Wiedefeld, thank you for making the time and for being with us today.
Of course, thank you. Is it okay from here? I don't have any PowerPoint. Yeah, okay, very good. Again, thank you for giving this opportunity to talk about the 24th CTP, as we call it. I'll show you a little bit about Governor Westmore's transportation priorities, our funding challenges, and then provide some update on our specific modes. With me today is Will Pines, the Highway Administrator, and Holly Arnold, as well, who will also be presenting. The department is committed to work in partnership and transparency with communities throughout the state of Maryland. We will deliver services and facilities to support the governor's goals of social equity, environmental protection, and sustainable communities. Most importantly, MDOT will build and maintain a transportation network that provides not just a physical mobility, but the economic mobility to lift all Marylanders and all communities. We made some progress, but we got a long way to go. Some tough work in front of us. Our priorities internally, obviously, first and foremost, is safety. So far, unfortunately, this year, we've had more than 470 people die in Maryland on their vehicle crashes. At current rate, the state is on track to have more than 600 roadway fatalities this year, That would be the most since we've had in 2007. So we all need to redouble our efforts. And we stand ready to work with all of our police, particularly across the state, to try to drive those numbers down as we try to hit the goal, Vision Zero goal of 2030. To that end, I have charged the team to take a look at both some of our regulations, our policies, our highway design, our sidewalk investments, our pedestrian investments, to see what we can do differently to try to drive those numbers down. I've also directed the team to take a look at our complete streets policy, which was last updated 11 years ago. And that's very important because almost just under a third of the individuals and fatalities that we had last year were pedestrians and bicyclists. So we've got to do more there. Our second priority is to preserve the system, the multi-billion-dollar investment that we've all made across the state in our highway, transit, port, airport facilities across the state. And then finally, to enhance the system, particularly in those areas that support economic growth, community, the goals across the state. For example, the governor has revived the Red Line here in the Baltimore region. We've also started discussions with Amtrak in terms of MARC service, run-through service to Delaware and Virginia. And we are clearly working with the administration to do the Frederick Douglass Tunnel and what that means for transit, particularly the MARC system. We're also working with other state agencies, local jurisdictions, private sector to create inclusive economic opportunity by leveraging underutilized state transit stations and turning them into unique community-focused transit-oriented development. We partnered with Medco and issued 2 requests for proposals to study TOD opportunities. One study will examine opportunities along the MARC Penn line. The second study will look for innovative ideas to support investment around light rail and subway stations here in the Baltimore region. Another priority is transforming our transportation network to be resilient to the impacts of climate change, so we can mitigate and anticipate weather-related system disruptions, especially in our vulnerable coastal communities. As we work to build a more equitable transportation network, we're also working to make Maryland a more equitable state for everyone to do business. MDOT is conducting the state's latest disparity study to help us determine whether and to what extent discrimination impacts businesses in the Maryland marketplace. We need your help in spreading the word to all businesses, including small, minority, disadvantaged businesses and disadvantaged businesses, to encourage to get involved with this study process. The Assistant Secretary Bridges is heading up that effort. We can go online to stateofmarylanddisparitystudy.com and take our survey. So we're trying to build up a database on that. And so everyone's input is important to get that study correct so that we can line up work for the minority firms throughout the state. Another core principle of the Moore-Miller administration is partnership with our local and regional partners. I want to acknowledge this is an area needing improvement on our end, and I've asked the MDOT team to redouble our efforts to ensure we're working in close collaboration with this body and peers throughout the state. I think we can do a much better job. I know this group is very interested in the strategy we'll use to leverage carbon reduction program funds that are suballocated for use in the Baltimore metropolitan area. I want you to know we stand ready to work with you to obligate those carbon funds. Additionally, through the Transportation Revenue and Investment Needs Commission, of which Chair Ball is a member, we're working to rethink the state's consolidated CTP process to improve transparency and tie the state's investments to clear outcomes tied to the state's goals. It's important to me. I've been around this process for decades, and it is time for a total rethink. As we're creating a transportation system that connects Marylanders to life's opportunities, works as a true multimodal system for all across a connected network of transit, roads, and bridges and trails, we're in a lot of financial pressure. The administration has been listening and partnering over the last 7 months. And we'll encourage you, we need to do a more balanced investment portfolio to meet the needs of all Marylanders. Creating a transportation network of the future while preserving and maintaining existing services in our multi-billion infrastructure will take tremendous investment. A transportation network also must compete economically on a regional, national, and global level. Frankly, we need to invest at a level that's greater than the current resources provide. As you know, our key funding source is the Transportation Trust Fund. There are many funding pressures on the trust fund that impact the bottom line. such as obviously the historic inflation and labor and material issues we've all been dealing with at the state, local level, national level. The drying up of the COVID dollars that the state received. The state received almost $2 billion for transit support operating costs over the last few years. Those dollars disappear into next year. We've also lost transit revenue, both in Washington and in the Baltimore system, and some of the advertising potential you get from having high ridership. We're also impacted by the sustainability of the motor fuel tax. As cars are more efficient, which is fantastic, and as we electrify the electrification fleet, which is fantastic, but the trust fund, almost over 20% of the revenues come from motor fuel tax. So that is a very large issue we have to deal with. We've also had a reduction in vehicle titling taxes as people keep their vehicles longer. They're running better, that's great, but from a financial perspective, it does hit us. As a result of all these pressures, we're going to have difficulty in delivering the needs and desires of today's users, as well as meeting our economic goals in the future. It is true that we have a historic opportunity to compete for federal funding through the provisions of the bipartisan infrastructure law, particularly on the discretionary grant availability, but you need the state dollars to match those dollars. So that's a challenge for us. All this is evident in our draft 24-29 CTP, which totals $21.2 billion. It's not fully funded. Starting next year, in fiscal year 25, we face a budget shortfall of $100 million. And without being addressed, that shortfall grows rather quickly. And it's just to maintain the existing program and services that we have. This overall shortfall does not yet include additional investments that we want to deliver, some of the things I've already mentioned. In the past, MDOT would have made decisions on its own regarding where additional funding is spent, or which previously programmed projects would be delayed or deleted to address the funding shortfall. I chose a different path because there was need to be more transparent in the funding decisions made in the state's capital program. Decisions about how we prioritize our projects should be based on our shared values and priorities, and need to be done with public discussion and be done in partnership with our stakeholders across the state. This is why the work of the Commission of the Transportation Revenue and Infrastructure Needs is so critical. This commission, which was created by legislation this past session, will examine transportation trust fund revenues and look for opportunities to modernize MDOT in the state's transportation system. The diverse commission includes public officials such as Chair Paul. The commission also includes business leaders, advocates, and several transportation representatives. The commission will have its interim report recommendations by January 1st to the governor, with a final report due by January 25. So at a very large level, that's what, from an MDOT perspective, to share some of the thoughts that I had. I'd like to turn it over to Holly, give a little bit more detail on her program, and then Will Pines to his, and then I'll go back to some of the other ones that are represented today.
Thank you, Secretary Weavel. Good morning. My name is Holly Arnold. I'm the administrator of the Maryland Transit Administration. And I do appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what MTA is doing to support frequent, reliable, and easy to use transit throughout Maryland. Public transit is essential to ensuring economic and social mobility, addressing the climate crisis and needed reductions in carbon emissions, as well as reducing congestion and promoting a safer and healthier streets for our entire region. Maryland's investments in new transit infrastructure and maintaining our systems in a state of good repair will make a difference in people's lives throughout the state. I'd like to highlight just a few of the exciting projects currently underway at MTA. So as the Secretary mentioned, in June, Governor Moore relaunched the Red Line, which will address a major gap in east-west transit service across the region. We recently released maps of 6 proposed alternatives, and we're looking forward to our next round of public engagement scheduled for early November. In the meantime, to provide expanded travel options for riders as plans take shape for the Red Line, we relaunched the Quick Link 40 in late August. This limited stop bus route saves approximately 25 minutes of travel time for riders who currently use the CityLink Blue and Orange lines. We're also in the process of replacing our entire metro fleet and train control system over the next few years. And I'm happy to share that our first 2 rail cars, which will be used for testing, are already on site. We're also beginning the process to replace our aging light rail fleet with modern, accessible, low-floor vehicles, and are excited to get that moving. We continue to make a wide range of customer-facing improvements as part of our Fast Forward program, which are designed to improve the customer experience, service reliability, travel speeds, and passenger safety. We're undertaking a major bus electrification effort, with our first electric buses currently being tested and planned to enter passenger service later this fall. And then on the commuter rail side, we're focused on MARC service expansion, which includes closing the MARC SEPTA gap and run-through service into Virginia. We're also partnering with Amtrak to replace the BMC tunnel with a new Frederick Douglass tunnel, including replacing the Baltimore MARC station with a modern, fully accessible station. And we're updating the MARC growth and transformation plan, which will be taking place over the next year, and will outline the vision for MARC service and how we can transition from a commuter rail system to more of a regional rail system for the state and serve the needs of all Marylanders. We released a survey yesterday, and I encourage everyone to share their thoughts with us as we can begin this process. Not in this region, but in Montgomery and Prince George's counties, construction is underway on the Purple Line, which is more than 58% complete, with more than 60 active construction sites and approximately 1,100 workers furthering progress across the entire alignment. And that project, once complete, will help with regional mobility, both in the Washington and DC regions. We're focused on addressing the many workforce challenges that have been facing the public transit industry, including a more challenging hiring environment, which has impacted our reliability. So we significantly stepped up our efforts to hire, train, and onboard new employees with increased wages and ensuring that we have competitive pay. And in every county throughout Maryland, MTA does support our locally operated transit systems and the crucial lifeline that transit can provide in those counties. We are currently working through a rework of the formula of that funding, and we look forward to partnering with our regional partners on that effort. This is just a small sample of the important work happening in our agency. We're committed to improving and growing transit throughout the region. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak today on the current work underway at MTA, and I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Will Pines from the State Highway Administration.
Well, thank you, Holly, and good morning, everyone. As was mentioned, I'm Will Pines, Administrator for Maryland State Highway Administration. And while I'm just a few months into the new role at SHA, I'm excited about our future. Under my leadership, SHA will continue to advance infrastructure projects that will connect Marylanders to jobs and economic opportunities. We are committed to building and maintaining a world-class multimodal transportation system for all users that is safe, equitable, and balanced. To do that, we are reimagining how our highway network will support the needs of our diverse communities. SHA will be focused on several key areas, including safety for our users and especially vulnerable users and our work zones. Building out new and existing bicycle and pedestrian facilities will be a key part of that, and getting back to prioritizing regular maintenance on our roadways and keeping our assets in a state of good repair. Earlier this year, we launched an aggressive operational campaign to clean up our roads. So far through 2023, we collected 280,000 bags of trash. This is a significant uptick from 2022. We look forward to our continued partnership with counties as we both face that same challenge on the litter challenge. At SHA, we're picking up the trash, but that also includes making efforts to educate and remind Marylanders about the hazards of litters on our roadway. We've also begun to review many of our internal processes and to take a fresh look at organizational efficiency. I've asked my team to focus on project delivery, permit approvals, and procurement timelines. We recognize that when SHA streamlines these processes, we will be better positioned to provide more effective partnerships with local and county governments, as well as developers, as your teams advance and deliver their priority projects. Collaboration with our partners is critical to our mutual success. And earlier this year, SHA launched Maryland's first pedestrian safety action plan, or what we refer to as the PSAP program. The PSAP is a data-driven tool that targets enhancements to pedestrian and bicycle safety in communities across the state. Some of the corridors are identified in your regions. Putting this plan into action, we've made significant investments to move these projects forward. And I'd like to highlight a few of SHA's projects throughout your many jurisdictions. In Anne Arundel County, we continue the partnership with the county on evaluating potential solutions for traffic relief on the Broadneck Peninsula. This summer, we continued the US 5301 pilot ramp management to look at options that improve traffic flow and safety during peak summer travel periods. We also appreciate the partnership with the county on several projects where the county has brought part of the match funding forward to support project advancement. In Baltimore County, we have started the next phase of the I-695 Transportation Systems Maintenance and Operations Project, or what we refer to as the TSMO project, following the tragic preventable crash on I-695 that took the lives of 6 members of the transportation family on March 22nd of this year. This project is aimed at improving safety and reducing congestion along the Beltway from I-70 to Maryland 43 through part-time shoulder use and incident detection technology. The project is expected to be completed in winter of 25/26. As of fall 23, SHA has officially moved into the construction phase of the Maryland 139 Charles Street's improvements and water main replacement project. This is a collaborative effort between the state and county, and we thank you for your partnership. In Carroll County, we are currently in construction on the Maryland 91 Bridge replacement project at the crossing of North Branch of the Patapsco River and the Maryland Midland Railroad. SHA has also initiated the Maryland 97, Maryland 140 to Maryland 496 Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, or what's referred to as a PEL study, which in fact had its public meeting last night. In Harford County, rehabilitation work on the Maryland 161 bridge over Deer Creek is wrapping up and is expected to be completed later this year. Our District 4 team recently reviewed the signal at Maryland 543 and Maryland 136, which we worked with the county executive on that specific request. And we identified that there in fact was a defective sensor at that location that was impacting traffic queues. And as that follow-up, we're working to continue that location with a capacity improvement project that's anticipated to start in 2024. In Howard County, we're currently in construction for $4.7 million on US 1 pedestrian improvements. And that includes new and upgraded pedestrian activated signals, installation of continental crosswalks, new sidewalks between South Hanover Road and Old Washington Road, the additional safety improvements along the corridor, and the project is expected to be completed in 2024. In Queen Anne's County, last but not least, SHA is working closely with the county on the US 5301 Kent Island traffic management pilot. We appreciate the partnership this last period with the county on that effort. And also the Federal Highway Administration recently awarded SHA $12 million in Attain grant money that will allow us to make safety improvements and adjust congestion through innovative technologies. This grant will enhance mobility in historically underserved and disadvantaged communities throughout the corridor. So I want to thank you for your time, and now I'll turn it back over to Secretary Wiedefeld to address his comments.
Great, thank you. I'll very brief, I would just talk about some of the Baltimore metropolitan region projects we have from the other modes. The Maryland Transportation Authority continues to move forward with the $28 million Chesapeake Bay Crossing Study Tier 2 NEPA process. That study is analyzing alternatives for providing adequate capacity and access to improve travel, reliability, mobility, and safety across the bay and along the US 5301 corridor. The toll authority plans to share these alternatives with the public next year. The Motor Vehicle Administration continues to deliver fantastic customer service, it really does. Going to the days when you need to bring a book for your appointment. More than 80% of customers are seen within 10 minutes or less, and nearly 70% of the customers are seen within 5 minutes of their appointment time. Turn to the Maryland Aviation Administration. It plays a critical role in supporting travel, tourism, and economic development. This includes obviously the PWI Marshall Airport, which serves as a major transportation resource and is an economic engine for the state, producing an economic impact of $9 billion annually. The airport is at nearly 90% full recovery following the pandemic in terms of passenger traffic. And looking ahead to this year's fourth quarter, airline seat capacity is up 18% from last year, and more significantly, 4% higher than the same period in 2020. They're growing, which is fantastic. We continue to welcome new airline partners as we do this, both on international and domestic air service. Turning to the Port of Baltimore, it's another economic engine, obviously, for the state and for this region. Last year, the port's at a record in handling $74 billion worth of cargo. Currently, the Howard Street tunnel project is underway and will allow for double stacking containers on rail. And this project will be completed by 2027, and that's a game changer for us as we compete up and down the East Coast for container traffic. So again, thank you for your time, for your patience. I'll be glad to take any questions that you might have, and the team could answer as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Questions from members? Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary and members of the team. We've had lots of conversation. I just want to make sure that I'm crystal clear as we're working through the train commission. My understanding is that the deficit that's projected in the CTP for the 6-year out, I just want to clarify and maybe underline, it is just for system maintenance for the most part. So things like Red Line, Southern Maryland Transit, Bay Bridge, even though that's toll authority, whatever happens with 495-270, all of those projects are not incorporated as part of the current shortfall. Is that accurate?
A number of those projects aren't funded. I mean, they aren't funded for construction. So Red Line, study, the American Legion Bridge, again, is in that stage. That's not even in the program yet. It's part of that problem.
Thank you.
Just to jump, so that would be on top of,
Yes.
and that total deficit over the 6-year is about 2.1 billion.
It's 2.1, but time moves on. And that number, as we look at our current budget, and as we look at future budgets, particularly operating budget.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. And as I'm sure you followed in the paper, there's a fiscal cliff that we talked about in the Washington region. That has not been solved yet. They're still working through that. That's roughly about a $750 billion hole that they have in there to deliver their existing services, of which Maryland is basically roughly 250 million of that to solve that. They have put on, they're working through different scenarios down there. Their budget process is a little bit further behind ours. And they're looking at roughly 150 million they're seeking in 25 and 26 before they address the larger issue. That's all being worked out in the, that with Virginia, DC, and Maryland. So there are a number of needs out there that still need to be funded. So that number will grow, as time moves on, as we add another year of operating, as costs continue to go up in some of these core areas, and particularly in areas where we have very limited control. We have contracts like with the Park Service, for instance, with Amtrak, and so some of the basic services we provide, mobility program, for instance, was contracted out. Those costs will continue to grow, and again, just like the costs that you're facing, and we'll have to address those as well.
And I want to applaud your commitment to transparency and public engagement. So I guess, at least in the preservation conversation, is the thought that after the engagement process, and I know we'll have more opportunity on Monday, at least in Baltimore, to talk to you, Baltimore County, I guess Baltimore City too, we're both on Monday. Is the thought then that following that engagement process, when there's a solution offered or proffered by the department on how to address that hole, is there then going to be another round of engagement about what the solutions actually are, if that makes sense?
Yes, and what the way that we like to frame this round is around how do we prioritize, right? Because there's lots of needs. So how do we start to prioritize those needs throughout the state? So I think that's part of the discussion. As additional revenues come in, if they come in, how do we prioritize those?
I think what I heard a little bit more in the chairman's question was also, where are we in the process, and is there an opportunity to evaluate the feedback that you hear and continue the communication and collaboration to continue to reevaluate and make some changes as needed?
Most definitely. I mean, that's what we're going to need to do. The reality of the financial pressures. I think that it makes sense that we'll focus on obviously safety. We'll focus on the federal dollars. Where can we use the federal dollars? Where's the maximum use? Because we don't need those dollars. So I think that's sort of the prioritization thing that I have in my head. But then it gets down to how, what's important to you all. What can we do? How does it work through environmental processes, things like that? All those things come into play of what we can deliver in the time we all want to deliver.
Other questions?
Yeah, so you're gonna be coming to our county soon, roadshow, and we county leaders have an opportunity to speak to you in front of our constituents who are, some of them are gonna have looked at the proposal and not be happy about something that are funded. Do you have any advice for us about what would be a constructive message in our statements to you? And particularly in view of, I think I think most of us around, maybe not all of us around this table understand that we need revenue. You know, when we talk about deficits, we have to have proposals for filling these gaps. I understand that the General Assembly is gonna be working on this, but what should we say?
Well, I think one of the things that, when you look at the trust fund itself, the history of the trust fund, it was designed in a period of time where we were primarily focusing on highways, is a reality. And now, over time, we've grown to support two major transit systems in the state. We don't have a mechanism that supports that. It's out of the same, mechanism that was developed 30+ years ago. And so I think that's part of the discussion that we need to, because there's some structural issues associated with that. Particularly the limitations it puts on us to sell debt, because obviously we have to do company costs first before we do that. There's coverage ratios, which then you start to hit upon. And it's, those are services we want, but we also need to address that, and I'm sure you saw it in your tour, there's very few major transit systems in this country that are supported by some sort of industry. Yeah, it's just a reality that we just have to recognize it.
So help educate our constituents.
Sort of as a jumping off point to the point about transit, I don't know if this is better for you, Mr. Secretary, or for Administrator Arnold. I just want to make sure that my reading of the draft that's been proposed is right. As I read it, there's a $290 million increase to WMATA in what's sort of in the draft form. Is that about accurate?
In terms of capital, I'm sorry,
yeah.
that would be
Okay.
It's driven by their capital program. As you know, there's actually a dedicated portion of the capital that comes from the general fund that was established several years ago. So that drives some of those numbers.
We're supposed to be on the CTP.
Okay, I guess that, and then I think, again, and I'm just trying to make sure I have my numbers right. I think there was about 150 non-Baltimore area transit increase as well in the draft. And then, again, just trying to make sure I have my numbers right. But if we back out the red line funding, which we're grateful for, I think it's really important that we're doing that. So, we really applaud the department for picking that up. But if we back out the funding for planning for the red line, it appears there's a 27 million transit reduction in the Baltimore area. Is that accurate? Am I doing that math right?
So the draft CTP doesn't include the close of fiscal year 2022. So we do the draft before we've actually closed the fiscal year. And so MTA underspent in FY 2022. We're doing a lot of changes to our process to make sure we're giving accurate budgets. So if you're looking at the 6-year period, it is currently, the final won't be, because we're pushing out a lot of money that we didn't spend in FY 22 into the current 6-year period. So we haven't really seen a reduction in our overall budget. It's just we didn't spend money in 2022. It's pushing out into.
So that money.
I'm sorry, 23, into 24, 25, 26.
So that money would fill what would be back to level. I just want to make sure I'm just trying to understand. So.
Yeah, and I'm happy to follow up with, I was talking with your staff earlier on some of those numbers, but essentially it's, we underspent our FY 23 budget, and that's money rolling out into 24, 25, 26.
Other questions? Doug Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Secretary. With respect to federal funds, I realize, as you said, they were dwindling. Are there any remaining infrastructure grant opportunities available for any part of the system?
Yes, no, we're aggressively going after that. What I was making is that it requires state match. So as the pressure builds on the state dollars, that's the issue. But no, we're competitive. So you have to have that, we could be in the game, and then it becomes, the project itself. So that's all I was flagging, is to make sure that we have the state dollars to go after those dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Good.
I'm kind of blessed with our problems. Why we have one giant problem, we don't have all the other problems that the other counties have. But I want to thank you for your openness and transparency. It surely is a breath of fresh air to work with your team. So.
Yeah, and appreciate your time, Mr. Secretary, and your team. Look forward to seeing you all personally again on Monday. But appreciate the extent to which you're available and answering questions and working with us on these challenges ahead. With that, I think I'll turn things over to Todd to take public input.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Traditionally, during the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board, during this time, we allow the public to be able to speak to the board. If there are individuals who'd like to speak on behalf of themselves, we normally allocate 3 minutes. If there are members who would like to speak on behalf of an organization, we normally allocate them 5 minutes. Just looked, and currently there is no one requesting to speak who is signed up in the audience today. So we'd like to give an opportunity, if anyone would like to speak who is online today, to please indicate so in the chat. We will give them just a few seconds just to make sure that we don't have anyone. It does not look like we have anyone requesting to speak in the chat, Mr. Chair, so we can move on to gaveling out the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board.
Very good. Seeing our conclusion of the public participation opportunity, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
So if you was,
Mr. Mayor?
sorry,
Sure.
so it's an honor to be here with this leadership team here. Thank you for letting me be here. I feel like I'm at the show. I've arrived. Thank you, all of you guys out there, for making us look smart. I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I know this is a room full of problem solvers. I believe everything the governor's saying. This is Maryland's decade. We're gonna lead, we're gonna set the pace. If you come to Annapolis and you open the front door of City Hall, a 200 or 300-year-old building, there is a big neon sign that says, Annapolis is going electric. And we have an Annapolis Alternative Mobility Plan, an AMP plan. When you come into Annapolis, you're gonna be able to park your car and you're gonna be able to move through the city on electric mobility. Whether it's a circulator that is in order and will be delivered to us in 24, whether it's a bird scooter, an electric bike. We have these electric 10-minute trolleys that move you around the city. They move you to the waterfront. You'll be able to get onto an electric ferry, what we believe will be the first 100% electric bike to ferry option in the country, and will connect the historic district downtown across to Eastport. And then we're going to expand it through to different destinations in the county. And then the county executive is working on and all the county executives are working on mobilities, how we can mobilize our water. I think we're in a great place in Maryland. I'm excited to be part of the team. Annapolis is a great destination for us to connect to. I think we are at a great moment in the history. So I know it's a bit bleak. I know it sounded a bit bleak in today's meeting, but I really think we've never had this kind of leadership from top to bottom. And so we're going to get it done. Thank you.
Exciting things happen in the capital city, so thank you, Mayor Buckley.
We needed that.
I believe there's been a proper motion and second. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Appreciate you.